The USS Lantry is a Class 6 Federation supply ship assigned to the Gamma 7 sector. Counselor Troy calls Dr. Pulaski Kate, and getting into the biofilter bus and patching in a molecular matrix reader is no problem for Chief Miles Edward O'Brien. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we have our review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 7, Unnatural Selection, written by John Mason and Mike Gray, directed by Paul Lynch. This was January 28th, 1989. Where were you? Cirroc and I were going to get really deep into, biochemistry and genetic evolution and all that. Sadly, we have Dr. Mohamed Noor to steal our thunder here. He's a biogeneticist or a genetic evolutionary biologist or a big combination of those words from Duke University. So we'll let you talk about it instead, Mohamed. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be on the Seventh Rule. Yay. Thanks for having me.
Yes, Cirroc. We were so excited to just really show off our genetic, evolutionary biology chops. But
yeah,
maybe not.
Well, I mean, it's funny because after we just went through this, pandemic, I understand a little bit more than I would have had we not. So that was one benefit of kind of experiencing that together. We've had so many kind of public debates about, viruses, antibodies, quarantines, outbreaks. So I definitely have more knowledge about the subject than I did, going into this, let's say, when this episode would have come out.
Yeah.
But definitely want to hear a lot about what Mohamed has to say, about how this thing works and really if it's a realistic interpretation of the facts, because that's where we really try to break down the science and see, are they just telling me a bunch of mumbo jumbo, or are they actually telling me something that's truthful? So Mohamed, you'd be the best to kind of decipher that for us.
100%.
I can do my best. I totally agree with your point too about the pandemic too. That I used to always have to define RNA, but now everybody knows what RNA is now,
or thinks they do.
Right?
Yeah, or thinks they do. That's true.
Right. Yeah, Mohamed. First and foremost, did you see this episode in 1989 or thereabouts when it came out? And how do you feel that the science compared in 1989 to what we know now and what we've learned since then?
Sure. So yes, I'm sure I saw it. Maybe not right when it aired, but I'm sure very, very shortly after it aired. I was definitely watching Star Trek Next Generation in the late 80s. In January 1989, I was in my first year of college, so probably sometime in there I would have seen it. Maybe, again, probably sometime within a month or two when it aired, I saw that. Besides, there's a lot of aspects to it which are not very specific, right? So in that sense, you could say it holds up pretty well because they're not super specific about it. Like I would have, let's say I was writing this episode today and I was trying to write some script for it. I would have had a lot more specificity around some things in there. So actually what I did is I wrote out 3 possible scenarios to try to explain what's happening there. And then I sort of critiqued myself on each one. And what I like, and I tell my students this all the time, it's easy to throw stones and do actually, that doesn't work. But that's not fun, right? It's much more fun to say how could it work? How might it work? Even if it's a small tweak on some of the words they say in there. And there's not a lot of words. So just pulling up the script there, it has things like the antibody created an unexpected side effect that alters the genetic makeup of normal humans. Okay, that's not very specific. An antibody is doing something genetically. Their advanced immune system has created an antibody that changes normal DNA. The altered genes are the ones that control aging. Yeah, it's not super specific, but like I said, I worked out 3 scenarios, and I can go through each one in turn if you want.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And also, since I was so busy making a dumb joke at the beginning, saying how Cirroc and I want to explain biology, I should have also mentioned, Dr. Noor, 2 more qualifications, 2 more qualifiers. You are an occasional Star Trek science advisor as well as being a very good friend of ours and a great guy. So please continue.
I'm even more honored by the second one than the first one, but I'm honored by both. Thank you. So I tried to come up with 3 different ways that this could happen, where something is being emitted by the kid that's making people age very quickly. And it obviously has to do something with genetics. So the simplest explanation, I thought, is that something that he's emitting, these antibodies that he's emitting, change not the DNA letters, but change which genes are turned on or off, right?
Okay.
So we have like, 20-some thousand genes in our bodies, and we have the same genes in every cell in our bodies, but the same genes aren't turned on or turned off. So like, for example, our skin cells will make more skin cells. They don't make, heart cells, on our hand. And that's based on which genes are turned on or off. So if you think of like the DNA, like the letters, the words in a book, right? What you might think is there's some alterations that happen on top of them that might be like striking out some words or highlighting some words so that, basically you're reading them louder or different, but the same letters are in every cell, right? So that's kind of what this sort of epigenetic or something that's affecting which genes are turned on or off. So that could be one possible explanation. What doesn't work for that was the solution, right? That they just got this bit of DNA from hair follicles on her brush, and that was able to solve everything. Because like, okay, unless they turn her into a giant follicle.
Right. Okay. So what you're really saying is the hair follicle, the DNA inside the hair follicle, or the genes that are in each cell of the hair follicle can only self-replicate. They cannot derive an entire human from that.
You'd have to basically change them back to stem cells to do that, which they wouldn't do that, right? So that was one possible explanation of what's going on. It was something about genes turned on or off. And again, I should mention all 3 of these explanations are not mutually exclusive. It could be some mixture thereof. But I figure like that first one by itself doesn't work. The second one is probably the simplest one, which is it's literally just mutations. Like there's change in these DNA layers, and that's what people always tend to fall back on. All sci-fi loves mutations. The problem with mutations are random. Like if this antibody is coming out there, it's not going to make the same letter changes in every individual it hits and in every cell it affects and things like that. So it's kind of like, would that result in this consistent sort of aging thing, or would it just be like, just getting bizarre cancerous growth sometimes and moles and weird other sorts of things all the time? So that, again, I didn't feel like that worked great, but there's some basis to it, because to some extent, if you screw things up, then you might have some manifestation which vaguely looks like aging. The third one was actually my favorite. The end of every chromosome has a sort of cap that's called a telomere, right? And it's basically just it's like a cap. There's a bunch of repetitive DNA there. As you get older, your telomeres shrink, right? Essentially, as you're making more and more copies of every cell in your body, the telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually, like they get so short that they start causing problems. And it's thought that all 3 of these things could contribute to aging. And this is one of the things that people think potentially does contribute to aging, because as it gets too far in, you start losing some actual genes that have functions and stuff like that. So if you imagine this antibody might be affecting, rather than DNA itself, it's affecting the enzymes that keep the telomeres long. Maybe then it's actually essentially having a secondary effect on your genes. That to me was probably like the best explanation. Like, okay, you could make any of the 3 explanations I said work, but to me that just seemed like, okay, I can see this. I can see that this antibody is affecting one specific enzyme that then has this effect, which is pretty consistent across a whole bunch of people. It's like, okay, that works well. It still comes back to, everything always comes back to this brush thing though, right? Because the weird thing to me is, what are they getting from the brush? I mean, the implication was they're just getting her DNA sequence. It's weird that like hundreds of years from now, they don't just have that on file for like everybody. I mean, I have my DNA sequencer on my computer. It's weird to me, like, why isn't that just on file? Like, why do they have to get that? Like, and with the extra bits of repetitive stuff, it seemed like they would just have that.
I just to jump in on that, when they said that they erased her DNA file after she left the previous ship, I was like, why? How much space does that really take? Like, it's just code. It's like information that you could fit it all in a file. It's a folder on your computer. So that was my one nitpick there. Yeah.
We could argue it's a privacy thing too, because there are a lot of privacy reasons why you might not want that sort of share. However, most of those privacy concerns are very specific to a very capitalist society, right? Oh, this is going to affect your possibility of employment. Oh, this is going to affect like your long-term care insurance. Oh, this is going to affect, like, it tends to be more in there as opposed to just true privacy. It tends to be more in that. But maybe there's still some other privacy things that don't fall in that, so maybe it still will work. The one piece which I can't actually fix in my head is the speed of transformation. So they beam her back, they fix whatever about her DNA, and she's just like back to the way she was before. Like, so the only thing I could come up with is maybe somehow the transporter was like using the DNA letters to make what should have been there already, right? Back to that form. The problem is if that were true, I don't understand why they wouldn't do that anytime anybody has any sort of injury. Like that would be like transporter is just a magic fix for anything then, right?
Right.
So
as long as we have your DNA before the thing happens, whatever happens to you, we can just magically fix it in this kind of medical way.
Exactly. And there's also all the other stuff too about like how does it keep her memories from while she was gone? Like that's all that stuff. I mean, the transporters are always like, I still actually think transporters are death devices because I mean, you're basically taking somebody completely apart and you're putting them together somewhere else with different matter. To me, that means that's not the same person. That's a duplicate of that person, but that first person is dead.
Okay. So here was some of the questions that I had when you were talking about the science of it.
Please.
I wanted to ask you. So, given the what you said as possibilities of the changes that could occur, my question is could that happen in an airborne situation with this other entity? This genetically modified 12-year-old that they had.
That's a great question.
Would that be able to transfer through airborne?
It's possible. So, it is true that antibodies can be inhaled and things like that from other things. They can be in spit, stuff like that. So, to some extent, yes. The tricky part, I'm glad you asked that question. The tricky part there, and this is something I was struggling with too, is how does it affect that much of her body that fast? So let's say you inhale it, then okay, maybe your lungs are going to start like aging faster or whatever is happening. Right. But like your whole body's doing that. I'm guessing somehow there's enough of it that it gets into your circulatory system and it's just spread everywhere. But it's you're right that it is at least problematic. It's not impossible, but it is at least problematic there. So that's a very good call. But that was what I was struggling with as well.
But that's
because I was thinking, No, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
That's a trope that we've seen all too often in Star Trek and sci-fi is they catch a disease or they get a laser shot at them and then they turn into a Klingon or they turn into they triple in size and become a monster. I'm like, I don't even understand how that's physically. They should at the very least eat a lot of food before they do.
The conservation of mass thing is definitely a tough thing.
Their body can't change that quickly. I mean, I can suspend my disbelief that some virus made them turn into a werewolf, for example. But I can't suspend my disbelief that suddenly their hair just went from, a centimeter to 3 inches in 20 seconds. Like that's where my brain doesn't work. Is there, I don't know, is there any kind of explanation for that kind of stuff, which is kind of similar to what we're talking about here? Is that's just no way, Jose?
Again, I never say never, but it is definitely a significant challenge. I mean, you'd have to say cell division is increased dramatically in this set of stuff. But you're right, like the mass has to come from somewhere. That's always the bottom line thing. The mass has to be there. The raw materials for doing it have to be present there. So and so when you see somebody like just suddenly growing, like, okay, like are they converting air into? I mean, where is this mass coming from?
They better eat a lot of food or something.
They're eating a ton real fast.
The other question I had was working in they called it the Darwin Genetic Research Station. And my understanding is that if you're working with infectious disease at a research laboratory, that you wear the proper, you wear some kind of protective gear. And it felt a little bit unnatural for me to just see everybody walking around in the lab coats. And I'm like, this is with an outbreak in it, it felt like there would be more precaution taken when you're dealing with these kinds of things.
Yeah. No, well said. No, it's true. Anything working with anything infectious, there's all sorts of precautions. Like, people say OSHA, the Office of Safety and Health and stuff like that, like they would never approve most of what we see in Star Trek. They'd be like, what? No. But the one thing for this particular place, I mean, they weren't I mean, although there was an outbreak, so they should have done exactly what you said. It is formally a genetics lab. So I guess more of the protection would less be about like germs. So there would be some for the germ things too, but some of it would be the danger of you're accidentally introducing, like as you're breathing on samples, you're introducing some of your DNA onto it or bacteria in your lungs into it. That would be, it'd be a heavy concern about contamination, even more so than health risks, unless of course,
Okay.
There is actually an outbreak in that case, then it becomes a health risk too. So like in our genetics lab, we always wear like gloves and stuff like that, because if we're doing these reactions, we don't amplify our cells. We want to work on the cells we're working on. So
right,
keep your stuff away from it. It was interesting. There was a comment made too. They said something like, are they genetically engineered? And they said, no, they're created or something. I'm like, are you just talking figuratively? What does that mean in this sense? Like, I didn't quite understand. There was a passing sentence there, which I didn't quite get. And they just
Isn't that the
really
same
quickly.
thing? We engineered it. We created it. That's
but there was, the person specifically said, no, we created, like, like I might take
the
with the
same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that argument comes from like where the actual babies originated from when they were children. If they were like done through some kind of in vitro process, if they were created in laboratories, or if they were
the kids or the people
natural birth, if they were done through natural birth and then augmented after natural birth. So I guess
that's a good call.
It would probably identify that.
That's a good call. Origin. I can see that.
Yeah. But there were a lot of questions that I had watching this. The telepathy also was something that I was wondering how and why it was a factor in the equation. Like, did the telepathy enhance the the ability for this thing to spread? Did the telepathy, what was the factor? Why did telepathy need to be introduced as the subject matter, and how did it enhance the story? I couldn't really make that correlation as well.
That's a brilliant question. I mean, I'm sure it was more storytelling just to show how advanced they are. So that's probably, from a storytelling reason, that's probably why they did it. Genetically, you try to think like, what's the material basis for telepathy? Like, something has to be emitted and something has to be received. Like, is it radio waves? Is it like chemicals? Maybe they're breathing words. Now you're like, oh, I love you. It's like pheromones or something. Maybe, I don't know, but
right. And then it would have been nice to see the correlation between that and how contagious this particular thing was. That would have been a great correlation there too.
Oh, I love that. But they took it even further. They even had telekinesis where they were like moving things with their mind. Like,
right.
Now we've jumped the shark here.
Yeah. No, I'm like, well, this is really necessary. This is just extra stuff.
We could have an entire video just on the biology of telepathy, Mohamed, and that's something for your YouTube channel, Bio Trekkie Explains. Everybody go check that out. But that would be a really good one because, we have things like on Earth, like ants. They communicate through what is it, like pheromones or something crazy like that. We have radio waves, or not radio waves, audio waves from dolphins in the ocean or things like,
there's like electric signals and stuff too. Some animals have electroreceptors too. So
exactly.
Things
like
all
that.
Sorts of cool communication.
We would initially think, cavemen would be like, whoa, telepathy, but we know that there's something going on there. So what's the science behind telepathy? How can that be explained? But there was one, I thought the best line. It was kind of philosophical, but also based in science to my limited mind. I think it was, at least. The line was, an attempt to control evolution had resulted in a species that is lethal to its predecessors. And it feels like that is certainly the case on our planet, that when something new emerges through mutations or slowly through just evolution, they end up wiping out its predecessors. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. And this was clearly an accelerated version of that. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if modern humans killed all the remaining Homo erectus that was out there. This is an example. No, I'm sure that happens quite often. Yeah. So I think it's less often that's a very intentional, actually going out to kill. I think it's often just they're so much better at using up this resource or something like that. that then is just completely replaced, where the other ones can't get any resource and they starve out or just don't reproduce nearly as much and eventually go away. I think that's much more common than actually like killing them.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was also thinking how that could be applied in in the way of artificial intelligence. That same logic about in a quest to perfect the human experience, you actually create something that could wipe it out.
Yeah, no, that's a scary but brilliant question. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you also about because they drop these lines on us, and to the novice it sounds like, oh yeah, okay, this is legit. I need to be like, it's above my head, right? And so one of the lines was when Dr. Kingsley meets Dr. Pulaski, she says, "Did you write the book on linear models of viral propagation?" And I'm like, is that a thing? Or are they just throwing away? like linear models of viral propagation. I mean, it sounds legit,
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I can imagine some scenarios, like, because when you say linear, does it talking about like the speed of growth, like where that like it grows linearly, or is it actually talking about like the actual replication process happening? Yeah, I thought that was a funny line, but it's not crazy. But like, yeah, what it meant, I wasn't so clear on either.
Okay.
Those so are like, certainly all words strung together, but
it could be applied to viruses in some way.
Yeah. Okay. So, sometimes I have my little BS detector goes off, and I'm like, I don't know. But this is a question for somebody who has way more knowledge than me. But like I said, once again, because of the pandemic and because we went through these things, viral propagation. Okay, that kind of sounds, something familiar to what I've been hearing. And I thought actually this episode was kind of prescient in that way, in the way we have kind of dealt with the pandemic. When you talked about quarantines, that was something that was really, emphasized in this. So that they can limit the outbreak to just that area and that ship. So those kinds of concepts to me were very prescient. And I was like, oh, these are the things that we have actually dealt with. And actually, to add to that, some of the concerns that I heard expressed when people had skepticism about taking the vaccine, some of those skeptics brought up points that were similar in nature to the ones that were brought up here, about their DNA being, manipulated, and what the side effects would be and how they wouldn't be able to determine those things. So the level of uncertainty and the questions that were brought up in this episode, I thought were something that were really reflective of society when the moment came. And we were all kind of facing this panic of, what's the right thing to do? Do you wear masks? Do you do this? Do you social distance? We got to do this. We got to isolate. We got to quarantine. And so I thought that was accurate. Some of the general concepts were accurate based on what we've really experienced.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
And just to add to that, also similar was we found out, with COVID and all that just like in this episode, it was the children to blame. We knew it. We knew it all along.
One thing that's interesting in so much of Star Trek, they very, very rarely have geneticists play the good guys. Like, you see extraordinary, and almost always like they're the cause of a big problem, or they're just outright evil or something like that. The only exception I could think of is Carol Marcus in the Wrath of Khan. She was the only case where it was a good guy. And even then her stuff got misused and blah, blah, blah. But pretty much anytime you see geneticists, they're always evil. And then the engineers, they're the ones who save everything. Like, okay.
Speaking of which, this was, I would say, the debut of Chief O'Brien and his big role as the engineer.
This was his big coming out party, like out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. He had all the techno babble one man can handle in an episode.
And he was even at the point where the tension was the highest. Like, oh, it's not working. He's like, wait, I got this. He's just like typing away on his thing and like, got it. I'm like, okay.
definitely definitely want to talk more about O'Brien in our second segment, because it was almost like he was the second star of this episode out of nowhere. Didn't even expect
out of nowhere.
Yes.
Yes.
But we're just about out of time with you, Dr.
Oh, I have
Noor.
another question for you,
Yes.
Dr. Noor, because maybe our audience wants to know these answers. Sterilite. Did that seem something that was believable to you? The sterilite substance, and were you sold on it?
I haven't heard of that. I wouldn't swear that doesn't exist. I haven't heard of a sterilite, but I mean, I guess essentially having some sort of encasement. I mean, yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so you suspended a little bit.
That didn't strike me as one of the more problematic aspects. I imagine if there's something there that could completely encase it, like, yeah, probably if there was some sort of antibodies or whatever in there, probably hold it all in. What I didn't understand is how the people were living in that. And quite like, are they in some weird stasis inside the sterilite? I was a little confused about that, but in terms of the infection part, like, yeah.
like you mean like in a cryogenic type state where their life signs are being supplemented or something to that effect?
Basically, it seemed like there was no rut. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, he's choking because there's no air in there. Like, it just seemed like he was fine. It's like sitting in that thing.
I was watching for it too. I was like, they didn't even poke holes for the nostrils. What's going on here? I paused it. I was zooming in.
Definitely getting out.
I'm like, and when he breathes out, shouldn't it fog up? Like, they did a good job with that. Whatever it was. Anyway, Dr. Mohamed Noor, thank you so much for calling in all the way from Duke University and teaching us some things, as you always do. We really appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. I love seeing you guys.
Oh, and everybody check this out. I'm wearing my Be Kind shirt. You can get yours at bekindmerch.org. It's Chase Masterson's group and team. And this is the Kenneth Mitchell variety. So you can go to bekindmerch.org/Kenneth Mitchell and get your very own Be Kind merchandise, which is a charity that goes to great causes. So please check that out. Anyway, Dr. Mohamed Noor, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We will see you soon, I'm sure. Everybody else, stick around. We'll be right back.
Always remember the seventh rule.
Yeah.
Damn, better than I've ever done it too.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Dr. Noor has left the building. We shall continue on. And first and foremost, of course, we want to give you the trivioids of the week. And they are: the Enterprise is bound for Star Station India to rendezvous with a Starfleet medical courier. The USS Lantry is a Class 6 Federation supply ship assigned to the Gamma 7 sector. Omicron, Alpha Yellow, Daystar 27. The USS Lantry's first officer was treated with the Thelusian flu 5 days ago. The Thelusian flu is an exotic but harmless rhinovirus. Dr. Catherine Pulaski is the author of Linear Models of Viral Propagation. Counselor Troy calls Dr. Pulaski Kate twice, I think. Chief O'Brien gets his first senior staff meeting. Dr. Pulaski's previous assignment was on the USS Repulse. Dr. Pulaski was an admirer of Picard for some time. Getting into the biofilter bus and patching in a molecular matrix reader is no problem for Chief Miles Edward O'Brien. All right, Cirroc, you teased it earlier, but where the heck did Miles Edward O'Brien come from having 1 or 0 lines every time he pops in to suddenly they're like, let's just use this guy. Let's make this a character. Let's make him a real person. And he was in the senior staff meeting. He even had an assistant, a subordinate that he was giving orders to. Like, his entire character beefed up in several different ways. It's really cool to see, wasn't it?
It was cool to see. And I don't know. I think I have kind of an explanation for it. Recently guest starred on Larry Nemechek's Trek Talks, I think is what it's called.
Trek Files.
Yeah. Trek Files. And in that discussion, he said, well, we're going to bring up a couple of topics we could talk about. What do you want to talk about? And one of the things I wanted to talk about was the representation of Latinos and other minority groups in Star Trek, and what kind of email exchanges were happening with Gene Roddenberry and the studios about that. And so he was able to dig up some of his files, and
as he always does.
And he found a letter, a communication email that was, or maybe it was a letter, because I don't think emails were even around at that time. But it was a letter that said, it was addressed to Gene Roddenberry, and it was talking about the representation of the Hispanics on the show, and how there wasn't a good amount of them, considering that they are a large demographic of the population. And so that was one of the big concerns in this letter. And we got into the, that idea of Hispanic representation in Star Trek. But the letter went on to talk about, and by the way, this was brought to Gene's attention by a fan at a convention. So someone in the convention,
right?
Someone in the convention reached out to Gene, said, this is a problem. You need more Hispanic representation. And also the Irish American guy that you have on that show, which would be Colomini and playing the O'Brien character, should have more to do. We like him, and he should be given more responsibility. And so that actually is encapsulated in this email. And so and it's dated in around 1989, if I'm not mistaken. It's either 88 or 89, that email. I mean, that letter. And so if that was in circulation at that time, it's really close to around the time that O'Brien gets his role increased and enlarged. And so I may suspect that it had something directly to do with this kind of a communication that was going on.
So that fan at a convention was the reason for O'Brien's coming out party. So what that means, everybody, if you see a writer, keep harassing them with your ideas. They love that. Don't really. Don't.
I mean, if it's a good one and it makes sense, then yes, it does make it to, it makes its way around.
And just to add to the Latino thing you were mentioning, if I remember correctly, I did see very, very recently, like within the last month, a graphic that showed that per capita, Latinos are still the least represented on television in general. If I remember correctly, that was what was found, that they are the least represented per capita. Of course, you always have to go per capita on these kinds of things. So what that means is, great job being, pointing that out in 1988, that fan at the convention. However, somebody needs to keep pointing it out, because it's been 35 years and we got a little bit more work to do. So let's pay attention to that and see what we can do there for sure. But
I will say that, but I will also add to that nobody does the tech babble. I don't know. Maybe you said Geordi, but I don't know. I think O'Brien is pretty damn good at it.
Well, right. O'Brien today, in what we saw, he acts like he's speaking plain English. Like he's using these words strung into sentences that are not plain English. And it's just like if he's saying, oh, yeah, I just added a little bit of peanut butter to my chocolate. It was pretty good. You should check it out. Like he's saying it like, and that's what you want in somebody to be a convincing engineer. And this is what you'll see later on with Geordi. Geordi also does it. But yeah, we haven't seen enough for him to demonstrate that yet. But I agree. O'Brien walked right into it. They said, here's 50 lines instead of one. And he nailed it.
What's the Matrix line that he says that you read in the opening? There's something about the relay matrix coupling something.
Yeah, and there was a second part to that too that I didn't write. He says, well, first, this is the way he put it. He said something to the extent of, well, we'd have to get into the biofilter bus and patch in a molecular matrix reader. That's no problem. But, and then he said a second long ass confusing ass line. I'm like, I'm not writing all that down. I did the first one. That's enough. My brain's already hurting. Right.
That's how I felt too when I was listening. I was like, boy, that is the way he made it sound so casual. And I'm like, gosh, that would have been a self-sealing stem bolts for moment for me. and we would have been on take 25 before we got that right. I wrote down in my notes, chief engineer in the making, because this is why he's a chief engineer, because he does it like this. He could talk like this. He actually came up with the life-saving idea in this episode. He was the person who came up with the solution. He was the person that mentioned we can do all this, and I can. And so, his idea was the one that won over. But I wrote down technobabble master because he is masterful with his technobabble. He mentioned something about the transporter trace and this and that. That originated from O'Brien, and that I love that about this appearance in this episode. I just thought he really shined, and he was able to kind of show his intelligence and offer up a solution for what the crew was going through.
Yeah, it wasn't like his role grew. It was like his role took a leap. Usually you see it kind of steadily increasing, but in this case it was like a conscious effort where they're like, it was fully just, honestly, it felt like it was an O'Brien episode suddenly. Like it was clearly going to be a Pulaski episode, but they kept bringing O'Brien back, and again, having a subordinate, now he's not just the guy saying yes sir, he's the guy that somebody's saying yes sir to. That's a big thing. He's part of the the conference, the meeting with the senior staff, not even like all 8 or 9 of them, but just 5 of them or 6 of them. It was really impressive and really cool to see. And I did not remember that. I was not prepared for that. I was just too busy making ageist jokes the whole time when I was watching. I had a lot of, especially at Pulaski's expense, poor thing. But yeah, I was really happy with that. And it also seemed like, speaking of Pulaski, did you notice it seemed like they try to drop in possibly some kind of budding relationship between Pulaski and Picard, because it wasn't just that mutual respect that was growing, but it seemed like it was on a personal level. When she was saved, they actually like hugged, which felt really weird to me. It didn't seem like either one of them are huggers, especially not towards one another. But then they hugged, and then she turns to the other guys and she's just kind of like, yeah, you guys are cool too. But I was like, do I hear wedding bells, you two? Is there something going on here?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I gotta be honest. I'm a Gates McFadden fan at this point, and I'm actually, I'm anti-Pulaski. I'm sorry because I just have a bias, and it's bad. I know it has nothing to do with her acting and her performance. She's wonderful. I really thought she did a great job in this episode, especially when it came to challenging Picard. I thought she looked like a worthy adversary and stood up to Picard, because she has some kind of authority over him when it comes to the realm of medical decisions, right? So when everybody was coming at that senior staff meeting, she kind of has the more senior voice when it comes to this particular subject matter. Anything else, yes, you guys can decide, but I'm the outbreak girl, I'm the quarantine girl, I'm the medical doctor here, and I'm going to go ahead and set a precedence. Now, the back and forth between them was Picard saying, I'm not going to put my ship in jeopardy, and you're going to have to, these are the things that I'm looking for, which was, the isolation, which she came up with the runabout and all that stuff. But I just like the way she stood up for herself, and I thought that was great. But I have a difficulty kind of accepting her because, number one, Crusher and Picard had a little kind of chemistry thing that I felt was tangible and readable on screen, right? There is a thing when you watch the two of them where you feel like, I could see them getting together. I don't feel that same chemistry with Pulaski and Picard. It doesn't seem. I'm not rooting for them to get together, is what I'm saying. I'm just like, and it's even more weird if he keeps trying to flirt with the doctor. It's like, so
I know. I was like, does he just have a thing for doctors? Is this like there's just like a thing that he's looking for with doctors, some kind of situation here?
If you got to have the blue on for Picard to even look your way. So yeah, that was kind of unusual for me. And The other thing that I really didn't like, and just in kind of Gates McFadden and Dr. Crusher's role in her defense, was there was a line early on where Picard asked Counselor Troy, "What do you think about Pulaski? What do you think about her?" And Troy says, "I've never met a more dedicated person." And I'm like, that's kind of
That was quick.
That was quick. Like he just did a whole season with the other doctor. Her son is still within earshot.
Throwing shade.
And you're over here talking about you've never met a more dedicated person. So what, Dr. Crusher wasn't dedicated? She wasn't willing to, she didn't love her work. I thought she seemed pretty passionate about being a doctor to me. So I thought that was kind of a dig almost at Crusher, and I just didn't like that. I think you can give her compliments without throwing the other one under the bus. And that was one thing that kind of bothered me to a degree.
But you're not the only person with that feeling. If I remember correctly, and I didn't see it at the time when it was happening back in 1989 and 88, but I remember that there was a big outcry about Pulaski, about losing Beverly Crusher and replacing her with Pulaski. I don't know if it was more a reflection of how much people liked Crusher in that first season, or just more so just that they didn't like the Pulaski character or whatever it was, or how much time it took for them to warm up to her. But maybe by season 6 you'll love Pulaski, Cirroc. I'm looking forward to you just falling in love with her after 150 episodes. But yeah, you weren't the only one. And I remember when I was a kid and I first saw this, I was like, who the is it? What? Like, it wasn't like I was in love with the Crusher character. I didn't think it was like the best character ever, but I remember having a negative reaction to the replacement, and it's and like you said, it's not Diana Muldaur's fault. It's just, so who knows what the reason is. A lot of people, yourself, myself included, we had a negative reaction when Crusher was replaced by Pulaski, who always seems a little dour.
A little bit dour, a little bit arrogant about her stature or whatever, maybe, because she's so smart or whatnot. But there's some kind of air of something that I'm not vibing with. But I thought she did a phenomenal job in this episode. I thought this was her best performance, actually, up to date, because I thought she carried this episode. So this was, in my opinion, a good acting showcase for her.
It was her first episode, the first Pulaski episode.
It was a Pulaski episode. There were a few things I didn't like that Paul Lynch did on the directing side.
Me too.
When he was looking at the view screen on the bridge and they had everybody huddled to one side.
That's the exact thing I was going to point out. I swear, when you said there's some things he did that I didn't like, I was like, okay, when he's done with saying his thing, I'm going to say my thing. You're literally saying the exact same. Yeah. Right. First of all, they were all kind of close. And then they had Troy walk in between Picard and Riker. I'm like, you got the whole bridge. And she's like, excuse me, just get in here because I want you to be apart from each other. And I was like, what's going on? And then the shot really revealed how, if you're going to do that,
how awkward it was.
Keep it a tight shot. If you have it as a tight shot, right, we're not really going to notice it as much. But then he does this wide shot where we see everybody's bunched together in the corner here.
Exactly. And an empty bridge.
Yeah. What are you guys doing?
What the hell are you guys doing? I'm like, I understand you need to clear the camera so you can see as much of the view screen, and maybe they had green screen issues at that time. They wanted a clean, view of the green screen.
But if it looks awkward, figure out a different way to do it.
Figure out something else, or just remove them altogether and get more of a close up on the green screen, so we just see the view screen, and we don't have to see them in the foreground. That was so awkward, seeing them bunched up together.
Yeah,
like it just I wrote down unnatural selection because that's what this is for a shot. this is an unnatural selection for them to be gathered so closely together.
You know what we got to do,
guys.
Our good buddy Jason, the outrageous Okun, who might be in the free for all in a few minutes here. He loves to talk about directors and he kind of likes to poo-poo them a lot of times. If he's on this free for all, let's pretend like we love that shot and see if he goes along with it. See if he goes like, I disagree. I'm not a fan of what, because he loves to kind of get in there, or if he just lets that one slide.
Yeah, I just couldn't get it. I thought, this is a terrible shot. Why are you doing this? This is not the way to make the bridge look. You have a beautiful set here and they're just not using it properly. So yeah, I wasn't thrilled with some of the shots, and that was the biggest one. But yeah, there were also some other things that I did. Like I told you about Worf's eye roll. Worf has these moments where he steals the scene away.
Yes.
With
there was one in particular, right? It was at
Yeah.
the beginning. I made the same note. He had he's such a little pouty pooper. He's such a little stinker.
He's Grumpy Bear from the Care Bears.
Yeah, he goes. I was going to say that too. I really wasn't. When Pulaski wants to transport one kid in suspended animation, and Worf doesn't think that's a good idea, and Picard says, "Okay." Worf goes like suddenly he's 13-year-old emo Worf. He's got like eyeliner on and his jet black hair, and he's like, oh, they don't understand me.
I'm like, dude, chill out, man. What are you so upset about? The eye rolls were hilarious.
Yeah. Well,
I felt Picard too when he said, will you let me finish my sentences, Pulaski? Dr. Pulaski. And then she kept interrupting him further on in the episode. I'm like, can he finish the sentence? He's kind of right about that.
I thought that was such funny and counterintuitive writing that he calls her out for interrupting him. And then the next scene, she interrupts him again. And my first thought was, dude, he just said, and I was like, that's pretty good writing though, because what that shows is that's character. That shows that that's who she is. Like we would have thought that, oh, she's going to make that adjustment. They're going to continue to come together. But the writers are like, no, we're going to keep making them work for it. It's not going to be an easy coming together. She's going to keep interrupting him. He's going to keep tolerating it most of the time. And eventually he's going to be like, Doctor, damn it. I want to finish. She's like, sentence. Hey, we only have a couple minutes left. So let's get up into that home run of the day, the seventh rule, home run of the day. Who do you think, Cirroc? Your thoughts?
I'm gonna give the home run of the day to Chief O'Brien. He just stood out to me in this episode. He seemed like he was ready for the occasion. He was ready for the moment. He had the solutions. He was at one point like, even Geordi was back and forthing with him. Data was kind of doing a back and forth. Like, well, if you do that, then, and so he had enough to bring to the table, to make Geordi think, to make Data think, to make the Doctor think, to make the Picard say, maybe that's a good idea. We should try that. So it just shows to me that that's one of the things I like about Star Trek as well, is that people can come through. And it doesn't always have to be the captain saving the day with his idea. It's a team effort. It could be anybody. You never know who it's going to be on the ship. But it could be anybody who saves the day, who comes up with the idea, who, has a plan. And I like that it's the person who can be the hero is not always the same person in these shows. It's spread around. And I think that's more realistic and indicative of the everyday life that we live. So yeah, my home run of the day goes to Chief Miles O'Brien, aka Colomini, who just, to me, showcases his ability to make the difficult look really easy.
Could not agree with you more, Cirroc Lofton, friend for life. I do think that Chief Miles Edward O'Brien gets the home run of the day. And I also agree that, not only just because, he stepped up, he nailed it as well or better than they could have ever hoped, as evidenced by him becoming a series regular on Deep Space Nine. That would not have happened had he not demonstrated. They gave him a chance. If you'll notice, very similar to what they did a few episodes ago with Dr. Solar, the Vulcan doctor that came out of nowhere. And so I wonder if this was a deliberate dipping of the toes where they said, let's introduce this character, or let's introduce this character a little bit more. Let's kind of see, because then it becomes much more a cast of characters. It's so much better. It really enriches the show if you have a Wesley Crusher every few episodes, a Dr. Solar, an Miles Edward O'Brien, a Guinan. You have all these extra characters that aren't necessarily series regulars, but they fill out the show based on what the episode needs. And that is such a great direction to go into. Will they continue in that direction? We'll find out, though. That's the key.
Hope so.
These are some people that enrich our show. And they are named as follows: Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan.
Arucan.
Even if Bill leaves one day and is no longer part of the seventh rule, we're still going to want to sneak that in just because we're like, don't make us stop. Also, our pals, Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie Blander, Dr. Mohamed Noor, that you saw earlier, Tierney C. Dieckmann on a post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Neal Akasaka, Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach-Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Marsha Classic Schreier, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and the aforementioned Jason the Outrageous Okun. Everybody, stick around. Jason is waiting to join the free-for-all. It's going to be so much fun. Get ready. Get your gin and tonic, Grandma. It's going to be fun. We'll be right back on the seventh rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton. This is our hearty and healthy free-for-all with Melissa Longo. We have Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy. We've got Faith Howell, who's a big Lord of the Rings fan. We've got Jed Thompson, the return of. We have Mr. Anil O. Polat, who's got his own YouTube channel. Check it out. When it's his turn, he'll tell you what it is. Mai is live in Tokyo with some science stuff back there, I bet. We also have the Dark Lord Chris McGee in his Stembolt and Chill shirt. Dr. Susan V. Gruner is on the Enterprise D bridge. Jason Okun has his poster of the week. Carrie Schwent has her limerick, I bet. Matt Boardman, the Matt Boardman, is here as well. And Allison Leach-Hyde is toughing it out for us. Let's get up into this. Cirroc Lofton guesses the IMDb score.
O'Brien, Pulaski. I'm going to give it a... I think the story was pretty... I'll say a 7.2.
Dikembe Mutombo. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know what this IMDb score was or is?
6.7.
Yeah, I was thinking 6.8.
It's 6.8.
Oh.
6.5.
Oh, man.
Anybody else?
7.60.
Runs from Sue.
Love you, Sue.
All right. Today, Matt Boardman wins the Jake Sisko Award, 6.5 on the button.
6.5. Man.
Very good.
I could see that, though.
There's a pup there. That's cute. Did anybody catch any non-appearance mentions? I did not. All right.
Darwin, Charles Darwin. I didn't see him. No.
Did we ever get any appearances of Charles Darwin like on a holodeck or anything like that? No. Okay. Jason says no, so we can end it here. It didn't happen.
All right.
Melissa Longo, please get us started since you watched this episode recently, I bet. What are your thoughts on this episode? Did you like it?
From what I remember, it was an intriguing episode. But the thing that I took away most from this episode is me saying to myself, I really like Dr. Pulaski. She's a smart woman and she's not warm and fuzzy, which I get why that might be a turnoff to a lot of people watching it, especially after they got so used to Dr. Crusher, whom I love too. But Dr. Pulaski has a different kind of passion, for her work. So that's the biggest takeaway that I took from this episode. From what I remember, I watched it 2 weeks ago, I think. So it's not fresh. Yeah. That's all I got right now.
It's okay. That was excellent.
And the photo behind you, that's the picture of Ryan talking to people in Vegas.
Which one?
Ryan, you got to stop.
The shirtless creeper, the person like with really bad gas, or the loomer in the corner just staring, being like, "What are they doing? What's going on over there?"
I'm just gonna stare at you more and make you feel extra uncomfortable.
All right. Homer Frizzell is going to clean us up here. He's ready to go. He's out somewhere in New Yeezy. What'd you think of this episode?
I thought it sucked, really.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We also have Faith Howell. What? No, what's up, Homer?
No.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave the science talk to other folks and just zoom in on one little thing. People say the shuttlecraft was left behind. Look, if you've got a station with a single slot for a shuttlecraft, you're going to get that thing out of there, even if you're in quarantine. But I think it was beamed back to the Enterprise, and that's just a boring thing, so we never saw it on screen.
Good point.
Yeah, I almost regret watching this episode, so I will cede the balance of my time to those who enjoyed it more.
Wow.
Cool necklace, though. Is that the LeVar Burton version, the Denise Crosby version?
It is the LeVar Burton before there was a LeVar Burton version. Yes.
Very nice. All right.
So Homer, what was your rating for it? What would you rate the episode?
Oh, 3.7.
3.7. Wow.
Wow.
It's a low rating. 3.7.
That's not that bad. 3.7.
We got O'Brien.
That's 3/8.
Yes.
So that
I
brings it
love
up
O'Brien.
2 points.
Woohoo.
So it was a 1.7.
There was not much to redeem this particular one.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it alone.
But I'm hoping others have a different point of view and we can have a lively discussion about it. That would be nice.
Faith Howell, over under on 3.7. What do you got for us?
So I remember this one fondly from the old days, but watching it, a few weeks ago, you always forget to pause and then you're into the next episode as you're reviewing. So when I watched it a few weeks ago, I was just kind of ambivalent. And when I tried to cram it in right before today, I don't have a lot to say. It's just kind of seems like a solid filler episode. Maybe some stuff happened. We got to see Pulaski. I did laugh a little bit at the, I just turned 35. I'm like, oh girl, I feel ya. And then the knee jerk at the, oh my God, 12-year-old. That's not a 12-year-old. But then I was thinking about our sixth graders at school and how every year I look at the sixth graders and go, holy moly, they're grown. Like they look like grown-ups nowadays, where I swear when I was a kid, sixth graders looked like babies. So I don't know. Maybe this is just another episode of Star Trek being prophetic and we're just now getting into it. So
Very nice.
I like the look on Picard's face when she said, "I just turned 35." He was searching for a compliment. But he
Yeah.
could not.
Oh, you don't look a day older than 60. Jed Thompson is also here. What's up, Jed? Your thoughts on this episode? Did you love it?
I didn't love it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. I've got 2 points right now. One was a quote, direct quote was, "They were designed to resist disease." And all I'm going to say is eugenics. And do you want Noonien Sings? That's how you get Noonien Sings. I did, outside of that big issue right there, I actually liked both Pulaski and Picard going to Troy in a professional capability, a little bit more personal on Pulaski's side. But I thought that the writers were trying to pull in Troy less as a symbol and more of as a professional, which of course she continues to do great. And I think that was, I did notice that and appreciated that. Aside from that, this is, to quote Faith, a filler. A decent filler episode.
Filler. Sounds like nobody's liking this episode. Thank God. Just like what Faith said, there wasn't much to say about. I did not have anything to say about this. Luckily, we had Dr. Mohamed Noor joining us in the first segment. He had plenty to say because he's really smart and knows all about science. So he saved us there. Anil O. Polat is also here. He's got a ton to say about this one, I bet.
Well, I can focus on the science concepts, which I thought were pretty interesting. One, I thought it was pretty interesting. They can network the other ships. Like Picard was like, "Oh yeah, I just called over, gave a couple of commands, and now I control that whole ship." So it seems like in future episodes they could do a lot with that. I don't really think that they do, but I was like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of interesting." They don't really mention that again. The second thing was, it seems like those kids could be used as a weapon, so they could bring them back. That might be a cool concept, like, I don't know why you would genetically engineer somebody to kill everybody else. It doesn't really make sense, but like as a weapon or something, it might be kind of interesting. And then the third thing was, they opened up like a transporter can of worms where they could literally just make everybody not age forever. So, and that never comes up again, which probably is a good thing. But I feel like they could do a lot with that concept, just start making everybody young, old, nobody dies, And if they ever want to bring back characters from the other shows that have been killed off, there you go. Plot device right there.
Ooh.
Oh, true.
Plot
Good
device.
stuff. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Anil O. Polat. Although I disagree. I think that if we could all be regenerated younger, I don't think anybody would do it. My is live in Tokyo, aging gracefully. What's up, Mai? What do you got for us today?
Thank you very much. Love you. Gotta say, great character development in this episode. It was it gets an A+ for that. The rest of it, no. Science, I haven't seen the part that Mohamed spoke about yet, so I'm gonna just dive in and hope that it doesn't conflict with what he had to say, because he's definitely the man for that. But with all the COVID stuff over the last several years, I've been doing a lot of reading on this stuff on the NIH website and so forth. Science failed Star Trek, or Star Trek failed science this time around. Dr. Kingsley on the aptly named Darwin Station says that the immune system of the children would seek out and destroy the virus at a distance. No. The antigens, which are on the pathogen, which is what the virus is called, these antibodies are produced in our plasma. It has to get into our bodies first, unless you're literally sweating plasma, and then that plasma can somehow get out into the air. No, that was absurd. She says that the antibodies produced change the DNA of the virus. Well, great, that's the idea, but that's called cell destruction. That's the whole point of antibodies. They don't change it and just leave it there to infect somebody else. That also is nonsense. I mean, look, the key point is antibodies are selfish and xenophobic. They only care about things in their little neighborhood that speak their language. They are very specific. So I thought that was silly. And then it went on, it got worse with Pulaski trying to say that the DNA being self-replicating and therefore there was the problem. Like, that's what the body is designed to do. I mean, anybody that's ever dealt with cancer, that's what they introduce DNA damaging agents into the body to try and destroy the cancer in the first place. That's actually what happens. The body, if DNA is damaged, the cell says, okay, I'm going to stop replicating for a moment, or it says I'm going to fix myself, or it says I'm going to die and let another cell start fresh. So a lot of really bad science in this episode. It drove me nuts. I wish they'd done it better, because I looked to this show in part for some of the science aspects of it. I really like that. This episode, no, not at all. But great character development, so I think I'm going to focus on that.
Mm-hmm. One of our favorite characters that's developed recently is our good pal, Mr. Chris McGee. What's up, Chris McGee? What did you think of this particular episode?
Yes, Unnatural Selection, aka we've learned our lesson from The Naked Now, where instead of just beaming right over, they say, let's see what's going on over there first before we subject ourselves to something that might be dangerous. Thank goodness. I thought it was an okay episode. Again, I look at it through rose-tinted glasses because I saw these when I was much younger, and I just ate them up regardless of whether or not they were good. From an objective point of view. One couple of things that kind of stood out to me was even after Picard had told Pulaski not to interrupt him, then during their next conversation, she does so again twice. But, Picard kind of gets to pass it on and interrupt O'Brien when he's starting to explain how the transporter was going to work. Speaking of O'Brien, I love that he finally got a larger role in this episode, as was already mentioned. The first time he's been referred to as a transporter chief, and the first time he's actually been given the name O'Brien. He was quite surprised, the actor, when he saw the script, says, I've been given a name. So fantastic. Of course, I'm sure Jason will bring up the point of how he got that larger role. If not, we'll save that for things left unsaid, perhaps. Of course, we know that now, beginning in this episode, Pulaski hates transporters, just like, of course, Dr. McCoy. I guess being a doctor maybe gives you a better special insight or a better understanding of what happens to your body during transport, just enough so to make you fear it. So there's that. I'll save my nitpicks and other boring observations for things left unsaid. Strangely enough, there were quite a few what I thought were memorable quotes in the episode, stuff that has stuck with me. Hard to pick just one, but I guess I would appreciate it if you would let me finish my sentences once in a while.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much, Chris McGee. We've got Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Seems like every time we talk to her, she's out traveling, but I think she's home today. What's up, Sue? What did you think of this episode?
Well, when I started to watch it, I remembered it, obviously, and I had to put the science aside or else I couldn't have watched it. But having put the science aside, I actually liked it. I liked it because we get to see Pulaski. I just love her so much. And yes, I love Gates as the doctor too, but I really love Pulaski. They have on one of the original series movies, I just can't think of which one it was, where they take over the ship from another ship. I just can't remember which one it is. But I had issues with, I said it, put aside the science, the DNA filter and all that was kind of weird. But we've also seen this aging thing before, so I kind of rolled my eyes about that. We've seen it multiple times. Did anybody else notice Wesley Crusher's comm badge?
Mm-mm.
It's all silver.
I didn't see that.
Check it out. I rewound it a couple times to make sure it wasn't the lighting. It doesn't have the gold and silver. It was just all silver. And I think I'll save the rest for what's left unsaid. But I
Good
actually like it. I
catch.
would have given it an 8 point something. It's a TV show. It's supposed to be not real exactly. It's science fiction. Fiction.
It was just fiction, I think, in this one. Good catch though about the comm badge. We've got Jason Okun here, who in the Zoom chat said he gives this one a 9. Care to defend that, Jason?
Oh, absolutely. I'll absolutely defend a 9. I'll defend anything.
How was the directing? Did you really like some of the shots in this?
Well, I'll get to that, Cirroc.
Yes.
Absolutely, and to me, this show is kind of a par for the course. It's a sort of a quintessential season 2 episode of Next Gen, and probably even 80s television to begin with. It's sort of a by the numbers cliche type episode, and you kind of see what happens when you take 2 pretty decent original series episodes and trying to combine them, and that's what you're getting. I mean, to me, it's a mishmash of the Deadly Years and Space Seed. I mean, that's what you're seeing here, and we're not going to talk about the science, which was ridiculous, but in a sense, a lot of it is cliche. The solution is technobabbly and odd, and for various different reasons, and it's just there's a little bit of I'll give that a little bit of character development, and I do like the performances. I mean, that's what I do like, but I think it's slow, it's prodding, it's cliched, and frankly not that great. And in terms of its look, I mean, Cirroc, you worked with Paul Lynch, I think, in the first season. I don't know how much you remember about his sort of direction, but it seemed to me this is kind of a poster child for what 80s television used to look like. You have a bunch of medium shots, a few cuts, singles, I mean, 2 shots. I mean, you really kind of had that quintessential look from the 1980s and maybe the early 1990s. I mean, to me, this is like the Next Gen look. At some degree, it worked. This is more of a bottle show. If there are a little bit going on with some other sets, but it's almost like a bottle show. That's not how it started, and I'll talk about that in things left unsaid. And Chris sort of hinted at some of that already. But at some level, what I'm finding, and this is where I'll end on this, what I'm finding is sort of a pattern where whoever was doctoring the scripts here, it may have been Maurice Hurley, did a yeoman's job, because once again, the crap they shot is not the crap they wrote. So again, I'll save the details for later, but that's what I've been noticing.
That's cool. Can't wait for that. Cirroc and I have a question for you and things left unsaid too. So stick around for that. This is going to be a fun one. We've got Carrie Schwent. What is up, Carrie? I've got a really cool, let's see, reaction just for you. What did you think of this episode?
It's okay. I don't hate it as much as Homer does, but I don't love it either. The 12-year-old kind of freaked me out just a little bit. Although I did enjoy when he's first beamed in under the styrolite. It sort of looked like a Ken doll still in its packaging that had been taken out of the plastic.
Yeah.
That's all I could think of was just a giant Ken doll.
Yeah.
And I didn't write it down, but I noticed when they beamed it back down, the angle that he's sort of leaning up against the table, and that odd sort of expression on his face was just a little bit weird. And Dr. Pulaski, they sort of brushed it off, but she's sort of a low-key cyber stalker. When Picard's talking to her old CO, and he's like, yeah, she did all this research on you when she found out about the promotion. She knows everything about you. they just sort of brushed that off, but it amused me a little bit. But the thing I did like the most, though, was Pulaski did take a big step forward for me in this one with the her and Data on the shuttle and just all their interactions, and her line about not being up to factory specs. If she had said that a couple episodes ago, I would have, absolutely hated it. But it actually made me laugh out loud this time around. And we've all been there, not felt quite up to factory specs ourselves. The science, just kind of fiction or not, science gives me a headache in general, so I won't really go into that. But it did sort of, in a roundabout way, inspire the limerick for the episode. And 4 of the 5 lines of this one, I just popped out of my head in about 30 seconds. It's probably one of the fastest I've ever written, aside from the awesome Binar one, which I don't think I'll ever be able to top. But here we are. Bad things happen when messing with genes. Consequences beyond your wildest dreams. You'll grow old and die. You won't even know why. Nature dislikes it when man intervenes.
Yeah.
But it's fun. O'Brien gets a name. He's no longer No Brian.
Yeah.
Different podcast I was listening to the other day called him that, and it just sort of stuck in my head. But he did fantastic with all the techno babble. He actually got to be in a briefing scene and all the techno babble, so he's no longer No Brian. So,
and I bet he loves limericks too.
Being Irish, I would assume so.
See? All right. The Matt Boardman is here, who never met a limerick he did not like. But what'd you think of this particular episode?
There once was a lady from Venus. Wait,
no, shit.
That's not this episode. Yeah, it's interesting because, again, it's an episode that, I don't skip when I watch through the Next Generation, but as I get older, I think it becomes less and less exciting. But there are some aspects of it, though, that I do like. I myself, and for those of you who met me, know that I'm very pasty white. And so I always kind of joked that it is really hard for me to tan. And so in this episode, the fact that these kids have been genetically altered to have antibodies that seek out and destroy the virus I've always said that I had antibodies that seek out the sun and destroy the sun rays before they can get to me, hence why I can never tan. So, I appreciate that aspect of it. Maybe not in the same way that everybody else might, but, no, I one of the things that I really enjoyed about it is because up to this point we've had such almost an adversarial relationship between Picard and Pulaski. They frequently butt heads, and yet here's a situation in which one of his crew is in serious danger, and to watch the crew come together in such a way that they to save Pulaski in the end. And that reaction where Pulaski hugs Picard and they have that awkward moment there where it's just like, oh, wait. But that's, that's some of that continuing in the character development aspect of and the coming together of this crew, that even though we only get to see Pulaski for this season, but I thought that was a great moment between Picard and Pulaski for this episode. The other aspect I thought that was interesting is and which has been brought up is, this is technically eugenics, which I would have to go back and look and see at what point that became part of the Star Trek mythos, that it was outlawed and banned in the Federation. I don't know if that was in Deep Space Nine, maybe, but maybe in Things Left Unsaid, it'd be interesting to discuss how this episode would have been different with that, that part of the Star Trek history established, and how they might have told this story differently from that.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Mr. Matt Boardman. We also have Allison Leach Hyde here, everybody. What's up, Allison? What do you think of this episode?
Well, as a kid, it was not one of my favorites. I didn't particularly like it. It was just weird and odd. I didn't like it. Watching it today, though, I actually liked it more than I used to. So I think it is because of the character development in there. And I love funny one-liners, and there's a lot of them in this episode. I think, you get to see a little bit of the characters' relationships behind the scenes, like Riker and Worf, right? At the beginning, get the cute little, looks like they had a battle with time and lost, so it's great to just start, get more of that little bit of character building, even if it is just 2 lines on the bridge. I love that. I love Troy saying, let's just say you both have well-established personalities, because it's true. Of course they do. Of course, Picard and Pulaski have very well-established personalities, and they're both used to being right all the time, so they butt heads. But I like that they show in this episode that they want to get along and be the best they can be on the ship. And that's a great thing to show a kid, even if you don't like it as a kid, but you appreciate it more as an adult. So that's what I like about the episode. And I don't know why, but it got an Emmy nomination for hair for this episode. Yeah. So that's an interesting little bit. And Westmore was much, yeah, there you go. His hair was beautifully done. And got an Emmy nomination for that. Westmore was much more happy with the old age makeup in this one. So that's also great to know. Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leach-Hyde. Well, Cirroc, that's it for us today. Do you have any final thoughts on this fun episode?
Let's see. Yeah, I thought it was weird that the name of Pulaski's former ship was the USS Repulse. Like, who wants to be on a repulsive ship? Like, I'm repulsed by that. It's like, especially if you have a character who is always repulsed by things. It's like not exactly a good correlation to make. But I will end with the quote that I did like from this, and that kind of resonated with me as I was watching it. It said, even a mistake advances the evolution of human understanding. And I think that was a great little line that kind of sat with me in the way that I've learned from mistakes in my life, and not being afraid to, or being afraid to make mistakes, can also stop you from progressing. And, mistakes are okay. And I kind of got that vibe from that quote. I did like the way that it referred to it advancing the evolution of human understanding. And that I believe is an accurate statement and could kind of sum up what the message is that they were trying to push at the end of this episode.
Very good quote. Thanks, Cirroc Lofton, and thank you to Melissa Longo, Homer Frizzell, Faith Howell, Jed Thompson, Anil O. Polat, My Live in Tokyo, Chris McGee, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Jason Okun, Carrie Schwent, Matt Boardman, and Allison Leach-Hyde. My apologies, didn't notice how cool your shirt was until the end there. Sisko's Creole Kitchen, pretty awesome. Thank you all very much for joining us. For myself, Cirroc Lofton, Melissa Longo, Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. We'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.